Right, thank you so much. Apologies for being late. I was in the green zone discussing something very similar, discussing the area in parallel with what we do here. We are implementing the work day by day, especially the think tank, the research centers, the labs, and many good solutions coming from young researchers in the nexus of water, energy, and food. Let me just share with you what will make a difference. I hope this adaptation agenda, or the formal name of Sharm El-Sheikh adaptation agenda, for which the Minister of Foreign Affairs in his capacity as President of the COP is expecting us to operationalize the work. The good thing is that this agenda is a product of good support and partnership between the non-state actors, including the members of the Race to Resilience and the members of the Champions team and the presidency of COP27. And as you know, the first two items of this adaptation agenda, the first one is to do with agriculture and food system, and the second item is water. Some would argue that water comes first. Some would argue that the end results, given that water, 97% of it in some countries, like mine, is being used for irrigation, should come where it is. But anyways, the issue of water cannot really be disputed, and in importance, and the fact that we need different tailored systems to support the work in the water, energy, and food nexus based on region, countries, even for big countries like mine. I was just in that tour that took me from the new valley, which is basically desert-like, suffering more than others from scarcity of water, to other areas in Upper Egypt and the Delta where they are living on the banks like their predecessors for more than 4,000 years now. What we like to see then, how can we provide three things to support the work? The first is about research and development and technology that is required to support the work. I think in this community today in particular, the good background material about the challenges that we are facing since the MDGs time, the Millennium Development Goals, and even now, I don't like to repeat the figures that we are facing a crisis when it comes to water management at large, water scarcity in parts of the world, and in some cases, as we have seen in the Pakistan, countries are dealing with an opposite problem, dealing with floods. So this issue needs really to be held better, and the science here could come in the form of data, and that's why we welcome the initiative of the Secretary General in the early warning system. But that requires data scientists to analyze the results coming from the early warning system. It needs an ecosystem to support the work. It's not enough just to put an alarm somewhere or some red or green or yellow lights, but you need really to have the ecosystem in the economy and in society, and this needs huge investments in human capital and huge investment in training and capacity development. The second part, which is the biggest puzzle really, because without it there will be no support for science, research and development, which is basically how to fund the whole thing. As my colleagues have in the Champions team heard me saying many times, in the case of mitigation, we see lots of good opportunities from renewable energy to decarbonization. What we need is more funding at scale and the business cases there. When it comes to resilience and adaptation at large, including food systems, water, and agriculture, in addition to the rest of the adaptation agenda, we don't really see the private sector support. Globally, it's 2%. In Africa, 3%. As an African, I was happy. I said, well, Africa is higher than the average of the rest of the world. So I called my friends in the Netherlands, hosting the Global Center for Adaptation, just to get the breakdown, because 3% of $11.4 billion is decent, and we can really build on that going forward. But it's using a kind of a broad definition of private sector to include philanthropies and institutional investors. So that gets us back to how to better get some sort of projects in the pipeline prepared with Nexus, including the water, food and energy Nexus. I'm happy to see today that through some work that we did with my colleagues, including Lugulu here, when we started the whole thing of building pipeline of projects, we started with Africa in Addis Ababa, and that was in the first week of August. And one of the, I wouldn't say a byproduct, because it's basically some areas of policy and regulatory matters came out as a byproduct of the work. And then areas related to building carbon markets in order to use proceeds to invest in nature and climate. And then we had some ideas about debt reduction mechanisms to invest them in climate and water-related areas of work. But I'm happy to say as well that out of the 5 regional climate finance roundtables that Annie knows about them, Aqua Fund is coming out from that discussion that will be launched here today, and it was part of these identified projects, particularly based on its structure of blended both public and private finance, with a bit of risk mitigation in these areas of work. We need risk mitigators and risk and enhancers of credit at the same time. So it is working, despite the fact that whenever you try to build a pipeline, the majority of the projects will come more on the mitigation front. This is reasonable to expect, unless we do a better job in the finance and investment kind of work. So I said it's 3 things. I only talk about 2, which is basically science, research and development, perhaps encouraged by visiting 6 universities in Egypt here and 1 in the region. And all of them, without exception, have a strong project in water management, in desalination, in areas related to dealing with sewage networks and enhancing the overall water and sewage network systems. But you have the science available, technological solutions are there. We have finance. This world doesn't really have scarcity of funding. It has only scarcity when it comes to equity of the allocation of funds. But what is missing is the leadership that is required globally and with some particular countries, that they need to develop a better system of accountability in order to make sure that there is a continuous flow of funds based on the Copenhagen promise. Without the 100 billion and its multiples, because we know that the 100 billion is no more than 10% in a very conservative assessment of the gap, or 5% to be more reasonable about gaps of finance for adaptation and mitigation. But I'm concerned to say, and I have a solution for that, concerned to say that only 7 out of 23 countries required to support us with their finance, only 7 are doing a good job there. The Netherlands is one of them, France, Germany, Japan, and the rest are from the Nordic countries. So the rest of the countries need really to get their act together, especially those who are only happy giving us lectures on how to behave and how to push the global system for the better. But I think some sort of starting by oneself could be a good example to follow. Having said that, one area of work and support, because some of these countries are concerned that their money may not be reaching its end in terms of projects. One good area of work, especially in adaptation and water management system, Annie and I worked for many years at the World Bank. We know that one of the best examples in existence so far is IDA. And based on the benchmarks of IDA, I'm just having a very simple proposal. Because IDA comes with money and technical assistance. IDA is the International Development Association. They provide finance at very concessional terms. So based on the experience here, my proposal is simple as such. 10 years minimum grace period, 20 years after that to pay back the loan. The cost should be 1%, including the cost that is required for technical assistance. This is feasible, and this had been really established through different programs on IDA, though that they charge a bit more than this. But even the IMF, which I am affiliated with, but today I'm working with you today as climate champion, When the Resilience and Sustainability Trust Fund, but that, by the way, can avail funds, thanks to the leadership of Kristalina, it gives you grace period of more than 10 years, and the cost is 2%, or actually, let me put it in the former way, SDR rate plus a premium, small one, and then you pay back in 20 years plus. So it is doable. What we need to have is basically extend the service to low middle income countries. African countries, as Bogolo and everyone here should know as well, that Africa is not low income countries anymore. So the majority of African countries do not have access to concessional terms. The nice guys will tell you, well, you graduated from IDA, you can go and borrow. Yes, we can go and borrow, but for projects of importance like water, and if we are issuing bonds today, on average, it's anything between 9% to 15% if you want to access the markets, bearing in mind that there is foreign exchange variability as well. So the solution that there, I commend your work and your leadership in this area, the participant in this meeting. But again, it's this order. Comes with science, research, development, and then gets finance, but finance needs to be pushed by leadership. If we are stuck, we know why we are stuck. Not because we are lacking solutions, but because we lack leadership. And I hope with this gathering here that gives us hope that we can do a better job to save ourselves. And even as my good friend Mark Lowcock, the former head of OCHA, the humanitarian relief entity of the UN, he knows his folks better than me. He would say, well, even if you act just not in altruistic behavior, but in self-interest, you should be doing what is being required by climate finance and development finance. Otherwise, we'll be all dependent on luck, which is not really available in abundance, or some of us had to be knocking on some doors because we'll end up as refugees because of bad action that we are conducting today. Having said that, very grateful to the opportunity and apologies again for the few minutes delay, but I bet you had better introductory remarks by those who know it more from the field. Thank you.